Who was right in the Civil War movie? Without a doubt, this is one of the most controversial questions in the geek world. It's a question that, even today, several years later, generates endless comments from people passionately supporting their favorite team, whether it's Captain America's or Iron Man's. You might think that this discussion has no end. However, today we're going to try to answer this question using the great power of papier-mâché? Of philosophy. In order to do this, we are going to analyze the most important dilemmas within the Civil War movie and compare them with some philosophical positions and real-world political situations. So get comfortable and prepare to take Civil War very, very seriously. Go! The Geek Monitor intends to execute a suicide attack by detonating a bomb that would also kill Steve Rogers. Seeing this, Wanda contains the explosion, saving her companion, but unfortunately redirects the explosion towards a building where several defenseless Wakandans were located, who died in this incident. This situation, in addition to the events that occurred in the Battle of New York and the fight against Ultron, make 117 governments of the world agree to form something called the Sokovia Accords, an agreement that indicates that the Avengers will be under the supervision and control of a United Nations panel who will tell them when to act and when not to. This is the central moral dilemma of Civil War, the fact that Tony Stark thinks the Avengers should be controlled by an external entity and Steve Rogers, who trusts his groupmates more than the governments. Chapter 1. Who watches the Avengers? Tony Stark's vision in the Civil War movie seems to be very much in line with the thinking of philosopher Thomas Hobbes, who held that humans are evil by nature and that we need laws to live well. According to Hobbes, when a group of rational beings come together, say humans, they realize that creating a set of rules for coexistence is best for everyone, as it is not convenient for everyone to be stealing, murdering, or looting, so they create a series of mutual agreements called contracts to live better. This is called contractualism. In the movie, Tony realized that the Avengers team, despite having good intentions, has had many failures in its execution. These failures are thrown in his face by the mother of young Charles Spencer, who blames the team for her son's death in Sokovia. Tony's guilt over Charles's death and the creation of Ultron lead him to support the Sokovia Accords. This makes a lot of sense, as it sounds logical that an external panel made up of several countries could have better judgment than a team of individuals. However, Captain America does not share the same opinion. Steve Rogers makes a very interesting argument. What happens if the Avengers are needed somewhere and they are not allowed to go? Or on the contrary, what happens if they are sent to a place where they think they should not intervene? What Captain America is suggesting here is one of the flaws of contractualism, which only works if you can trust that the other person also fulfills their part. In other words, Steve Rogers doesn't trust that the United Nations panel will use the Avengers in the best possible way. It seems hard to believe, but the truth is that this way of thinking of the captain is also justified, since the United Nations throughout its history has been accused of acting reactively instead of preventively. In other words, it is accused of being slow and clumsy to solve problems before they occur, whether due to bureaucracy or the fact that there are interests or politics involved. In fact, they are accused of having allowed the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, Bosnia in 1995, and Darfur in the early 2000s. Just the genocide in Rwanda ended in the death of 800,000 people that could have been prevented. Another very important point is the fact that the Sokovia Accords would mean that the Avengers could be used as political weapons. In the comic, it's much easier to side with Captain America, as the United States, a country known for intervening in other countries' politics, would be the one controlling the team. However, in the movie it would be the United Nations. This makes us think that the 117 countries that signed the agreement would be the ones controlling the Avengers in an equitable manner. However, the UN does not function in this manner. It turns out there are 5 countries that have a special place in this organization and have something called veto power. These countries are the United States, Russia, China, United Kingdom, and France. The veto power is a special authority that these 5 nations have to invalidate a decision, that is, if Ultron attacked a city and all the countries vote in favor of the Avengers intervening in a single vote from these 5 nations against would prevent Captain and his team from acting. You might think that this doesn't happen often, but the truth is that Russia has exercised its veto power on several occasions, on issues related to the Syrian conflict recently. Here, as we see, both Iron Man and Captain America have very valid points of view about who should lead the team. However, we have to ask ourselves, what would be better for the world? Chapter 2. What is the use of the Sokovia Accords? When Iron Man and his team confront Captain and his allies at the airport, they do so with full authorization from the Sokovia Accords, and even so, during the battle, Vision accidentally attacks War Machine, leaving him without the use of his legs. Incidents like this make us think about the situation of Scarlet Witch and the Lagos explosion. That is, would anything have changed if Captain's team had been under the Sokovia Accords? It's most likely that both accidents would have occurred exactly the same way, with or without the Accords. And considering the bureaucracy, history, and political interests that the United Nations have, it's most likely that the Avengers would function much better independently than being monitored. So does this mean that the Captain is right? Not necessarily. It turns out that in Contractualism, we sacrifice some freedom for security. For example, we create laws that prevent us from taking what is not ours, but in return we can be sure that others will not take our things either. So, if a team of superpowered people like the Avengers existed, wouldn't you feel safer knowing that there are laws controlling them? We have to remember that the only reason we trust the Avengers is because we as the public know each of their members and fully trust their judgment because we've seen them in several movies. However, the people living in this world don't know the team as well as we do. This situation is similar to the real-world debate about the sale of firearms in the United States. While some defend the freedom to own a gun, another part of the population fights for greater regulation in their sale in the case of civil war. It doesn't mean banning superheroes, it means regulating them, something that sounds pretty good. So, as we can see, this leaves us with another difficult decision, as signing the Sokovia Accords would make the Avengers prevent fewer deaths and make them much slower to act. However, the world population would feel safer and would definitely be more protected in case another group of superpowered beings wanted to start acting. The question here is, what is more important to you? The number of lives that the Avengers might save in the future? Or being protected from another group of heroes who might not be as responsible as Captain's team? Here, as we see, both have very valid points of view, but what about Captain America and Iron Man specifically? Well, it turns out that despite everything, both have very big mistakes within the movie Chapter 3, The Hypocrisies of Tony and Steve. According to what we have seen so far, Iron Man's stance is based on the fact that he thinks a set of laws regulating the Avengers would be the best for the world. On the other hand, Captain America thinks that despite everything, the Avengers work better being an independent entity since he has a trust relationship with his teammates. What hypocrites the two are! On one hand, the first thing Iron Man does after signing the Sokovia Accords is enlist an underage kid who barely has experience with his powers and who is definitely not approved by the United Nations to help him in a fight against Captain America. Later, when he finds out that Bucky had killed his parents, he sets the laws aside again to try to kill him, to such an extent that he even fought against Captain America to be able to do it. It's understood that Tony was under great emotional stress upon learning that his parents had been murdered by the Winter Soldier. However, it's crucial to note that Bucky was unaware of his actions. In fact, if Tony had managed to kill the Winter Soldier, he would have been guilty of homicide, while Bucky could have claimed that he was not in his right mind at the time of murdering Tony's parents, which is true. Tony's actions throughout the movie seem to tell us that he really doesn't care much about the laws and that he simply agreed to the Sokovia Accords motivated by the guilt he felt. In a way, it's as if Tony found in these laws a way to unload the responsibility that he himself put on his shoulders. Responsibility that was not his, but he still had it. Captain America, on the other hand, acts throughout the movie motivated by a blind trust in his teammates and especially in Bucky, whom he defends at all costs. However, at the end of the movie, it is revealed to us that Steve knew about Tony's parents. Where was that loyalty and trust then? The most interesting thing about Civil War is that it presents us with a scenario where neither side is absolutely right, as each point of view has its negative consequences, and the leader of each group betrays the ideology that they seem to represent in the movie. That's why we see Iron Man breaking the laws and Captain America betraying a friend. Similarly, the Sokovia Accords have the benefit of keeping the population more at ease, at the cost of having a less capable Avengers team. So, in order to answer the question, who was right? You need to ask yourself which of these viewpoints aligns more with your way of thinking, as there is no absolute answer. The most we can do in this case is choose the option that will bring us more positive consequences than negative ones, something we often have to do when making decisions in our life, as our world is a scale of grays despite always wanting to see it in black and white. Leave me a comment to let me know which side you're on. I also invite you to watch my analysis of the Civil War comic, which presents dilemmas vastly different from the movie. That's all for today. I'm Go, the Geek Monitor, and I invite you to subscribe to keep seeing beyond the obvious.